Hi, I'm Deb. I'm the host of this page, Dignity Together, and today I have a special guest with us. Let me introduce to you self-care expert Ellen Rondina. Ellen leads workshops and speaks on self-care, wellness, mindfulness, and making and sustaining positive change. She's born in Boston and now she resides outside of LA, and she's a licensed master social worker, a certified coach, and a metaphysical minister. She's had a rich journey of life experience and formal education, including growing up in a musical family and becoming a professional musician at age 10. She's traveled and studied in West Africa, and she's pursued a healing path. She's passionate about life, discovery, spirit, and finding and helping others find their rhythm. Her mission is to guide others into their own awareness and to support them in putting their intentions into practice. As a social justice and wellness advocate, her approach is from a strengths perspective. She uses her broad knowledge and experience to create a place that feels comfortable. So thanks for joining us, Ellen.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get right into it. So can you talk about what self-care is?
I can, yes. So I have a book that's coming up early next month, and it's the 5 pillars of self-care, and the first one is defining self-care. So I think for most people it's sort of elusive and it's really personal, and I think that's why it can be elusive, because people try to define it based on what other people think self-care is, or what they think they should be doing, or maybe what somebody else is doing, but it's really very personal, and I think it's also really cultural. So, for me, it's in general, it's bigger than people think. So there's actually a quote that I want to share that I found this woman's work through doing some research for my book, and I'm gonna read that quote. It says, "A world in which self-care has to be such a trendy topic is a world that is sick. Self-care should not be something we resort to because we are absolutely exhausted, that we need some reprieve from our own relentless internal pressure. True self-care is not salt baths and chocolate cake. It is making the choice to build a life you don't need to regularly escape from." That's Brianna Wiest. I think that's incredibly powerful, and really gets into, for me, self-care is every single decision that I make, right? So the daily little decisions, or seemingly little, like what do I eat this morning, or do I go to the gym and do cardio, or do I do yoga, or do I sleep in, or if I have something that I need to attend that night, or I wanted to attend, like a concert or some speaker, do I need to go? Is it important for me to show up? Is that what I need to hear? Do I need to be sort of out with people, or do I need to hunker down? So those everyday kinds of decisions about, like, what do I need right now? What is going to make me feel good? What's healthy, for my body and mind? And then there's also big stuff. So for me, the big picture self-care is about my values. And this is another pillar in my book, is making decisions based on values, based on my values. And that self-care fits into that. So how do I spend my time in general? Who do I spend time with? Who do I engage with? What are my career choices? Am I managing my money and feeling safe, and secure in my life in those ways? And so those, defining values and then incorporating self-care into values is kind of the next layer for me in terms of how I define self-care on a daily basis.
That's great. So what happens if someone isn't mindful of self-care? Like, why is self-care so important?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is, and this, as cliche as it sounds, that if you don't take care of yourself, nobody will, right? I mean, we hear that, but what does that really mean? And particularly for people who are out there, doing work for other people, you can't be your best and you can't do your best work if you aren't well, right? If you aren't taking care of yourself. And so that sets up people to be unwell and also unfulfilled. And so it's this sort of perpetuating, cycle. And I think if people, can find and use their gifts and talents, which I believe we're here for, right? We have to find what is our unique path. What are we there to give? And also that we have lessons to learn. And so I don't think that we can give those gifts and talents, and I don't think we can learn those lessons if we're not taking care of ourselves. So sort of both sides of the coin are cyclical, right? The sort of not taking care of yourself, not able to learn your lessons, not able to give your best self. And then on the flip side is if we are taking care of ourselves, we can find those lessons, we can give our best self, and then we're living, as it says in my bio, in our rhythm, right? So I think that's the cyclical process. It's either sort of one side or the other, and sometimes flip-flops, but usually easy to stay on one side if you're kind of there.
Great. So what are some myths surrounding self-care?
Mm-hmm. Well, one I think I touched on, which is the idea that self-care is like salt baths and chocolate cake, right? Sort of like, oh, I get a massage once a month, or, I got together with my girlfriends, or, I got a pedicure, and all of those things are self-care. They can be certainly in somebody's kind of self-care toolbox, right? I get regular massages and I get pedicures, and I make sure that I have social time, but it's so much bigger than that. So I think if people think that that's all it is, then they may be deceiving themselves. Like, oh, I do that, I'm taking care of myself, and then not really pay attention. Right? So self-care is considered to be a global solution to our world healthcare. I mean, it's out there in a way that's quite in a social justice way. It's very big, that really, and self-care advocates, Audre Lorde is a very famous activist who talks about her self-care as a radical act of justice. So I think one myth is just that it's sort of, smaller really than it is, and I would say the other one is that self-care is selfish, so that people feel like they're going to be judged if they say no, for instance, right? If they take care of themselves, and the reality is that if we're all taking care of ourselves and we're all supporting each other to take care of ourselves, then we've really shifted the conversation quite dramatically. So I think those are probably the two biggest myths.
Okay, great. Are they are those sort of the big mistakes that people make too when it comes to self-care, or are there other things?
Yeah, I think that's a big one, like just not taking it seriously enough, not realizing kind of the full extent of what self-care can be. And then, yeah, definitely thinking it's selfish, judging themselves, but mostly because they think other people are judging them, right? And then the other big mistake is that people don't have a plan, and so that's part of how, I structured the book as well, in that, well, you have to define it first. You can't really have a plan if you don't have a definition and you don't even know what it is for yourself, right? And then at some point you have to sit down and go through the steps of figuring out a plan and write it down. And, we are 92% more likely to reach our goals if we write them down. So it's a pretty big mistake if you don't have a plan, you don't have it written down. Yeah. And most people don't. That's just it's a misstep.
Yeah. Okay. Why would it be important for somebody who's being bullied at work to make self-care a priority?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, I think that empowerment was the first thing that comes to mind, right? So sort of taking back your power, right? So this is not about this other person who's doing this to me, but this is about me, right? So who am I? What do I need? What is it to be well? And so being in that state, if you're somebody who is taking care of yourself at any level, right? But at a sustained level, even better, you're going to be much better able to manage that situation, whatever that looks like at any stage, right? So if it's confronting the bully or talking to HR or quitting your job, whatever, right? People are going to be at very different stages of the process of how they're going to handle it, and it depends on the severity of the bullying, and right, there's so many factors. But if you're taking care of yourself, then you're focused on you and not the bully, right? And so then you'll find some strength and power in that to be able to have some clarity around how to deal with the situation, right? How to make decisions around that, about, and basically the underlying thing is going to be what's best for me, right? So it turns the table. So the focus is not on the bully, focus is on me.
Yeah, great. And this is a good transition. I had a chance to take your self-care assessment.
Oh yeah, good.
Talk a little bit about that and like sort of what things people can think about, what areas people can think about when it comes to self-care.
Yeah. So the self-care assessment is taken from a larger assessment that I felt wasn't necessary because there were so many overlapping questions to this. It was the most popular one that I found when I sort of went digging for what's already out there. And the categories, you know, people come up with different categories, but essentially you're talking your physical self-care, emotional, psychological, spiritual, I think there are 7. Environmental is another one. So breaking down your self-care into categories, right? Which helps with the planning, but it also helps you really think about self-care in a much broader way. Like, what is environmental self-care? That's not something that people generally think about. And it could be any number of things. So the way that I chose to set up the assessment is to have 4 questions for each category that were broad enough and relatable for almost everybody, to really get them thinking about like what falls under physical: eating, sleeping, moving, right? Your sort of basic things. Now you could do nutrition and it could be its own category, but then that's just too much for people to think about, really, unless that's something you need to sort of do as a second step, right? So thinking about the different, the main categories in your life, and then the main pieces of that, and assessing kind of how are you doing now? Where are you at in that? Are you, doing a really good job? Are you doing like an okay job? Or is it like not even on your radar? So that's what the assessment looks at. And then you got some results, right? And was that helpful to see the results? It shows you kind of a grade and then what that means, kind of a snapshot of how you're doing.
Yeah, I found it useful because I didn't even think of some areas. So just being mindful, of what I'm missing, basically.
Yeah.
So where can people go to find out more information about your services, and they can put a plan together?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. So on my website, which is Kamala Sound, and we can probably post that, right? So I don't have to spell it out because that would be silly, but kamalasound.com. There are links all over the site to the self-care assessment. I think that's the first step. And then you'll get, as we talked about, everybody who takes it will get a response with a snapshot of sort of like, here's how you did, right? Here's what this means. And then a follow-up to that is a self-care action guide. And I would say that's sort of your like step 1 and step 2. So here's this action guide that can help just get moving, because I think, again, as it says in my bio, it's really about intentional action. I do think we get a lot of great information, so even if this video is helpful for people and it inspires people or gets them thinking, if they don't actually do something, it's just we move on. We go back to our lives, and it's very difficult to do anything differently unless we really take the steps towards action. So that action guide, it's got lines written in there. You can fill them in, print it out, or do it on the computer and actually make some progress towards defining self-care and action steps towards a plan. I have individual coaching that I do with people. I also have a free Facebook group that has some support. I do group coaching, and the idea with the group coaching is it's small groups, so no more than 4. It can happen organically if a number of people choose that option at the same time, or it can also happen with colleagues or friends or people that want to do it together. And then what I do is take them through a process similar to my book, which is like a workbook, but with the individual coaching. So I take them through that personally. So that's another option, and I do have an online course that I'm taking registrations for, but that's not until September. And so that's essentially the same process, but without the coaching, and it'll be about 10 to 15 people.
Great. And what is the name of your book?
Self-Care Revolution.
Great.
So definitely we'll, give you that information and have you posted it. It'll be an ebook, and it'll be out at the very beginning of April.
Oh, great. Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
There's so much to talk about. No, I think really important is to take a step, right? So to take the assessment and to get the action guide and to take a step towards that direction and then figure out sort of what's the next step, right? So I think it's really about action. Excuse me.
Great. All right, well, thanks so much for joining us. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and Ellen or I will answer them.